Hello and welcome back to the channel Darkness to Christ. In today's video, I want to touch on the idea of Satan and why I believe that the Christian view of Satan is wrong. Now, in Christian theology, Satan is a fallen angel who was in heaven with the Lord, but he rebelled and was cast out of heaven down to earth. Now, when I became aware of Satan, my initial thoughts was like, okay, he's an evil being. But the idea that he rebelled against God and was cast down to earth didn't make any sense to me, because I always thought, if God is all powerful, all knowing, all loving and perfect, why would anyone rebel in the first place? Number one. And number two, if God is all powerful, etc., why wouldn't he just destroy Satan there? Why chuck him down to earth to torture humanity and mess with humanity? Doesn't make any sense. And that was something that really never really made sense to me. And then I started looking up on YouTube and researching, looking in the Bible, different views. And I stumbled upon Judaism view of Satan. And to be honest, at first, when I started watching these views, obviously, naturally, I'm inclined to follow Christ. I don't call myself a Christian, but I follow Christ. And general view is that Judaism is opposed to Christ. That's what generally people think, from me coming at it from a reasonably newbie view of it. So I don't claim to be a Christian expert, but I'm seeking the truth, and I believe I'm truly born again spiritually, not as Christians. I'm not a born again Christian, I'm born again spiritually. And my channel is called Darkness to Christ, not Darkness to Christianity. And I started looking up this video, and as this gentleman, the rabbi, was speaking, it made far more sense of what I suppose the Old Testament view, not just the Jewish view, but it's the Old Testament, the old word of God, how they view Satan. And he was saying that Satan is a servant of the Lord, and that he's not a fallen angel cast out of heaven, but he is literally a servant of the Lord, who is, his role is to tempt us and to try and, I suppose, keep us away from God, because God created the world, and for us to know God, we need to know the opposite, and we need to have free will to choose God. But to choose God, we need something to try and pull us away from God. That's how he explained it, as far as I'm aware. I'm not maybe the best at explaining it, but it made sense what he was saying. I'll put a link to the video of his in the description. It's a very good video and very much worth a watch. And then I started to look into the scriptures, and he put some in there to back it up as well. And if you look at the scriptures, it actually backs up what he says. And there's one here from Isaiah 45:7. It says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. So there, clear as day. God creates the light, but he also creates the darkness. He creates peace and he creates evil. Now, people who maybe lack a bit of understanding and wisdom will say, oh, if God creates evil, he must be evil. But God is wise and he has a plan. And then in the next verse I've got proves it. It's from Lamentations, and it says, for no one is cast off by the Lord forever. Though he brings grief, he will show compassion. So great is his unfailing love. And that's one thing that you understand is, and as somebody commented on one of my videos, a very, very good point, is that God is not, it was on my Calvinism thinks God is a psychopath. And the gentleman was saying, or the female was saying, I can't remember who it was, made a very good point that God does not bring grief because he's just a psycho, and he revels in bringing pain to humanity and torturing people in hell forever. That's their view, not my view. So it makes sense that he uses it for his glory or for his own wisdom. And in my life and in the story of Job, he brought a lot of grief, but I realized for me personally, it was for my own benefit. And now I see the wisdom behind his grief, and I'm grateful for the grief and pain that I had in my life, because I was an atheist, but it brought me back to God. And now I'm so much happier and fulfilled and live a purposeful life through returning to God and having the love of God in my life and the truth of the real God in my life, not so much the Christian view of God. So he brings grief, but he can also use it for his glory. Now, I will concede and admit that sometimes the evil in the world I do not understand, but I think that's just my lack of understanding. Like, for an example, I'm from the UK and there was a nurse who murdered a load of babies. And then you have like school shootings and pedophiles and people who abuse children. That's one thing that I can understand Satan tempting us to, drink and do drugs and be sexually promiscuous. But for Satan to, if he's a servant of God, to try and tempt to do pure evil things like I mentioned before, that's something that I struggle with. And that's what happened in the story of Job, basically, is what I'm trying to say, is that Job was questioning, why is all these things happening? And then God showed him a vision. God came to him and showed him a vision of the universe and how he created it and how it was so complex and we can't really understand it. But there is wisdom behind God's creation and everything that happens in creation. And whilst we may not understand it, we have to have faith in God's plan and God's love and God's mercy, and that it will all make sense in the end. And the final part of the video is explaining how Christ was the example of how we overcome Satan. And Adam and Eve was the example of how they fell, and they fell to temptation. And then from that fall, humanity, we were always drawn to sin. That's part of the sinful world. So we're born innocent, but because we're born into a sinful world, we're naturally tempted and we're always going to fall to sin. But Christ came to live as a sinless life and show us the example of how to live. And through all men, through Adam, all men fell, but through Christ, all men can rise. And that's what I have done. I'm born again spiritually through my pain and suffering. But through that, I came to Christ. And then I realized that Christ was a living example of how we can overcome sin. And then we enter the kingdom of heaven on earth and off of earth. So that is my video on Satan. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you like it. Subscribe for more. Any comments, put them below. Thank you and God bless everyone. Goodbye.